In today's episode of Quick Chat, I speak to Felix, Head of Marketing at OnSecurity, who shares his journey from civil service to becoming a passionate marketer, highlighting the evolution of his marketing strategies and the importance of data-driven decisions. He discusses the formation of OnSecurity, its target market, and the significance of adapting messaging for different stakeholders. Felix also elaborates on the role of marketing in securing Series A funding, building a sustainable marketing strategy, and exploring future trends and technologies in the marketing landscape. If you found this episode interesting, please leave a like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hey Felix, appreciate you taking the time to join this podcast. I'd love to know what initially sparked your interest in marketing and almost how you found yourself in this career.
Cool, yeah. Thanks for having me, David. So ultimately, I started out as a civil servant, found it super bureaucratic, quite slow, was there for 2.5 years with ambitions to kind of continue, but realised it wasn't something that I wanted to do. Decided to go away, do a couple of ski seasons, and in between those, managed to fall into a mixture of a sales and marketing role at an agency.
Okay.
And I found it super interesting, the kind of disparity between, but also the alignment between sales and marketing. And I hated the rejection of the sales, so decided that marketing would actually be a kind of better back office way to sell to organizations.
Sure.
So then after that, I went away and kind of did some research on it, and it was really, the digital marketing era was well and truly underway. There was lots of different ideas and ways to market outside of just kind of out of home and the traditional ways of doing things. Sparked an interest and went away and built my own kind of blog website style of things around skiing, where my kind of passion was lay at the time, and just to show my interest and way, and eventually managed to get myself working for a small boutique agency.
Okay, amazing. I'd love to know, I guess, almost how your passion for marketing evolved over time. So obviously you had that blog post. How did that develop into what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. So I think kind of my passion for marketing's changed slowly over time. Originally I did that blog post because I thought marketing was all about the content and the blog and what people would read, and that's how you'd get your customers. Now, writing is probably my least favorite part of marketing in terms of longer form writing. However, the shorter, the short, snappy kind of subject lines, ad copy, I quite enjoy and have definitely improved over time. But my passion over time has developed into the more data-driven side of marketing. And I definitely feel like being a generalist marketer, I've got to the point now that I really heavily rely on a lot of data, just make a lot of my decisions through data-driven decisions, and try and instill that with my team now as well. And my real passion is allowing and seeing the impact of marketing and making the businesses that I've worked for really understand why marketing is important for them, and getting the buy-in from senior leadership.
And I guess, how do you almost balance that creative side with the data-driven side of marketing?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be quite a difficult thing to do, right? You have some minds that are super creative and want to get on and create these amazing campaigns and develop super designs. And then you've got these other people, myself sort of included now, that will look at the data and really only make decisions quite often on that. And I think in marketing, there's a mixture of being creative with your approach and a slight gut feeling, balanced with some data-driven decisions. And there you do run the risk sometimes of being too data-driven and only making decisions on that and stopping yourself from maybe exploring a different area that you could creatively approach.
I'd love to learn a bit more about OnSecurity as well, sort of what you guys do, who your target market is, your ICP.
Sure. Yeah. So OnSecurity was basically created around 2018, and it was created by 4 founders who all met in the Middle East, and they were all pen testers. Now, pen testing, just for verbatim for people in layman's terms, it's ultimately a way of ethically hacking your organization to then find the vulnerabilities there, which then allow you to remediate those and become more secure. So OnSecurity was formed off the back of pen testing being such a laborious and kind of arduous process traditionally, and they decided that they wanted to put the customers first. and develop a platform which allows customers to almost like self-service, schedule, manage, and book their pen testing in a simple way. And we feel like we're now at a point that we've really delivered that. And we always continue to listen to our customers and help and continue to develop our platform further to basically, we want to become a market leader for pen testing, right? We want to be known in the industry. And I feel like we're starting to make waves with that.
That's really impressive as well. I'd love to know sort of who your ICP is now, who you're targeting, and kind of what your plans are as the company develops as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one to kind of talk about as well. You know, if I wanted to say our ICP, ultimately, well, if I wanted to say who we could actually sell to, it'd be anyone, anyone with a business, anyone with IT. However, if you do that in marketing or as a business, you run the risk of not really having any direct approach or any sort of strategy. So we've developed an ICP based on company size, and then within those companies, there will be different personas. So at the moment or previously, we've traditionally been selling to kind of smaller, leaning into medium-sized businesses, because those are ones that would be a relatively quick win. They would need a pen test and then they would move on, and then they come back in a year's time. And for those kind of smaller businesses, we'd typically be looking at a senior IT person, whether it is a CTO or a CISO within those businesses. Now, as you kind of gather into the medium and enterprise size businesses, there will be teams within those businesses that will all have needs for pen testing for different reasons. So, for example, you might have in an enterprise business, you might have an IT team, you might have a product team, you might have a development team. And within those teams, they're all having different reasons why they need the pen test. So it might be the infrastructure to secure the data, or it might be that they've developed a new app that needs to be tested. So in terms of our ICP, we've become a lot more targeted and a lot more understanding, especially going into our medium and enterprise businesses, that it's not just one person. It can be multiple different people, and they'll all have different needs for us. And also on top of that, when we're actually selling to these organizations, the way that we do that, the messaging will be different. If we're selling to someone that's actually going to be booking and scheduling the pen test, they want to know that it's going to be a great pen test, that is CREST accredited, that it's a manual pen test, and then also how's the platform going to save them time. Now, if we were selling to someone who's actually not going to be managing the test on a daily basis, but is slightly more senior and wants to see it for, say, a board level or an overview of all their teams, they might want to know about kind of access groups, what the visibility they have, how easy it is to see this information. So the messaging does develop and change. And so although we've got a massive market we can go after, we're trying to be quite particular with the way that we approach it.
I've got a couple questions just on that as well. So let's take, for example, how you said your messaging changes depending on the stakeholder that you're selling into. From like a tactical perspective, as you've gone up market, how do you know what messaging resonates with each stakeholder? What kind of tactical steps do you take?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting thing that you raised there. So very, very recently, I've actually had the SDR function move into the marketing team. Now, this allows us to have a really exciting, constant feedback loop with the SDRs, who are the people that are on the phones and having email conversations on a daily basis with these people. And it allows us to be agile, to adapt and understand what the needs or the challenges that these people are facing. So we're going to be, we've adapted and built in this feedback loop, which is going to allow us to really be agile with our messaging to this target audience. And there's going to, with how technology's changed and developed literally in the last couple of years with AI as well, you can imagine that it's going to develop and change continuously, not just with AI, but with other technologies, which means that we're going to have to be constantly on top of understanding different needs and messaging for these people. And like I mentioned, we've traditionally sold into smaller, into medium-sized businesses. So our understanding of our ICP is still growing on a day-to-day basis for these medium and enterprise businesses, and having this SDR team move into the marketing function is a super opportunity to do that. Outside of that, previously as well, we would run email campaigns, but they would be they wouldn't necessarily be conversion campaigns. They would be ones to help us understand what messaging is actually resonating with people, what are they engaging with, what content are they clicking through on, and then we look on the analytics and what they're staying on. And that would help us understand what we were going to be targeting with the messaging as well.
That's really interesting. And I guess as well, something you mentioned is sort of your understanding of your ICP changes every day. And I guess I'd love to know almost how that decision to go up market came about and what steps you're taking to kind of refine it as well.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the reason we're now going more up market is we recently got funded for 5.5 million with Gresham House Ventures back in June time, which was super exciting. It was a long process, and obviously in the technology industry at the moment, there's not been a huge amount of funding that's been going on. So it was a super huge win for us as a business and something we've been working towards. So with that funding, it allowed us to really develop the platform further, which then in turn means that it has the capabilities to work with medium and enterprise businesses, which, as well as that, we were able to bring in the resources, sales, marketing, developers to actually progress into those industries as well. And we found the product market fit, right, which is the most important thing when actually going to market with these things. So now we know how to progress, and then there's the constant loop of speaking to customers after gaining kind of medium and enterprise ones, understanding their needs, and then developing it even more to bring on more of those customers as well. And then in turn, hopefully continue to grow as well.
Yeah, amazing. No, congratulations again, guys, on
Thank you.
the Series A. I'd love to know a bit more then, I guess, about your role and the role that marketing played when you were going to raise that Series A. If you could kind of walk me through that.
Sure. So I think, to be completely transparent, with the 4 founders and a couple of others were the key drivers for generating this Series A. And I think something that stood us in really good stead was the fact that we'd been bootstrapped and profitable all the way to that point, which is quite rare for technology businesses. Yeah. And so that was a really good start. But in terms of like the marketing team at the time, we had kind of what we put forward to the investors of what we want to achieve to progress and hit these certain levels and milestones in the future. We had to ensure that those months leading up to that didn't change. So we had to ensure, we were working on a very small to no budget. We had to be like creative with our campaigns and ideas. And then we also had to ensure, say, like the paid media that we were using was not going to waste. But on top of that, it was ensuring that I was kind of super transparent and open with all of the results, because otherwise, when the due diligence happened by the investors, if they found something that was untoward, then, that could throw everything out the window.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess something interesting on there is you say about the small budget and kind of the limited resources as well. I'd love to know kind of how you maximize that prior to the Series A.
Yeah, so there's a mixture of things. There was elements of trial and error, but on a small scale. So we'd be utilizing channels that were basically already paid for. So we use HubSpot, so we'd be doing a number of different email campaigns, and I mentioned about how we would kind of A/B test those with both messaging, and then we could use that for conversion. We'd always be looking at our inbound pipeline in terms of, or the kind of inbound journey. So when someone comes inbound, what's the steps that they're taking? Are there too many? Are there too few? So there'd be constant loops with the product team and the sales team, always having conversations with the sales team about understanding how those kind of the conversations they're having and how the leads are performing, making sure that we see them through the different deal stages. And then on top of that as well, I made the decision quite early on when I joined to change we have an ad agency that we use, to change our ad agency provider to an AI-based ad agency that utilizes AI to continually understand what's coming in the industry, the market, and then ensuring that they're optimizing every single campaign to deliver to the best point that we can do. So it was basically ensuring that everything was tight. There were no gaps leading up to that point.
That's really interesting. Could you talk to me a bit more about that sort of AI ad agency? It sounds, I haven't heard of that or anyone yet speak about that, so it'd be quite interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think initially, as many people would be, AI is kind of a new and exciting. Well, I say new; it's been around for a while, but it's really taken off over the last couple of years.
Sure.
And I was quite skeptical, and it was actually a cold outreach from this agency called Brightbid, who I'm a huge advocate of. And they approached me and said, we have this basically in traditional sense, you have an account manager who will manage your campaigns on a day-to-day basis. But included in that is they've developed like an AI kind of software that sits within, let's say, your Google Analytics, so your Google Ads platform, and will on a
Sure.
consistent basis make changes based on what's happening in the market and who's clicking on what and the demographics and the firmographics of everyone that's coming through. They'll look at your conversions and so on and so forth. Now, again, where I said I was skeptical about that, if you look in the back end of our Google Ads account and you look at the changes that are made, traditionally you might look at, a few hundred over the course of a month by a traditional agency. Here you're looking at 6, 7, 8, 9,000 changes by the AI as well. And what was really impressive to see is when we brought them on board, it took us down from, let's say, £800 to conversion to just under £300 per conversion within a few months. And since then, we've scaled our ad budget by, I think it's roughly like 700%. So we've kind of put a lot of trust in them, and we're seeing the rewards from it as well.
That's amazing. That's actually, that's really cool results
it's amazing,
as well. Yeah. I can understand why you were skeptical about that, because going from that many changes is a lot, but it seems like you've gotten some pretty good results. I guess I'd love to know almost how your marketing strategy is evolving now that you've raised the Series A and you may have less constraint on budget and resource. If you could talk me through that.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the benefits was I was able to hire 2 further people for my team, and it's super exciting to do so. And we've brought in one content marketer and a growth marketer. And the idea of that is so the long-term strategy is I would love us to be at the point as a business that the majority, as any business would, that the majority of our inbound pipeline comes from content and organic. And I want to build a super strong content funnel. In terms of constraints and like initial growth, we upped our ad budget. We're able to go and do kind of more trial and error phases and really understand. I quite like the phrase "fail fast," and then you get to really understand where you optimize, where you need to improve, what you want to double down on. And so we're trying to utilize as many channels as possible. But my long-term strategy is to basically build a super tight content funnel. And it basically works as simple as you are releasing kind of sponsored content ads on LinkedIn. These could be, these aren't basically talking about the platform. These are social proof. These are ones that are basically demand generation, their thought leadership. And because, I heard somewhere someone say, if you look at Red Bull, they never just post a picture of their can of Red Bull.
Yeah.
It's always like an extreme sports person with Red Bull assigned to it, right? So I've learned from that, you don't just place your product in front of people, you give them the reason why they need your product. So I want to have that as a sponsor. The website becomes the main funnel and basically the second most important thing to the business after the product. And then ultimately the social proof and the information that we have on our website stands us in good stead as a real leader as to why people should partner with us as their like cybersecurity expert.
Absolutely. And I guess from that, I'd love to know your perspective on almost how you manage to balance building that brand with the short-term sort of demand generation efforts.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously as soon as you get investment, there are more ambitious targets. And I think the short-term wins is definitely from the paid media side of things, right? It's the demand capture on the high intent leads. And that's something that's working super well for us at the moment. But that's also allowing us to work in the background, building out this content funnel and a great organic demand gen funnel as well. But what's really great as a business is all the founders really believe in marketing, and they also really believe in the alignment of sales and marketing. So we work very closely with sales and constantly on top of like, why has this not gone through as a deal that was committed? Why didn't it close? And understanding why that's the issue. So for the short-term growth, it's really important that we're kind of getting those quick wins whilst building in the background. But the difficulty of, like you were saying, to build that brand over time is we've also brought on board an SEO and digital PR agency, which is kind of helping us develop great content to drive organic traffic, and then also with the brand awareness for the digital PR, and also driving really strong backlinks for authority, and also sometimes some conversions as well.
Absolutely. If you were speaking to a marketing leader whose company was trying to raise a Series A as well, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one actually, because if I were a marketing leader trying to raise Series A, I'd be basically looking at the data that you have at the moment already. I would then be going out and speaking to as many customers as possible and understanding what about your product or your platform or whatever your service, what you're trying to sell, what is the best thing about it? And then really understanding that product market fit and doubling down on that particular area as the messaging for your target market. Then in terms of actually developing Series A, making sure that you've built out a funnel that is sustainable, that you can prove to investors that will return results over time, right? And I think it's just making sure that it's a really tight function and you can really prove the results that can be, that what you're doing at the moment can actually be scaled if you actually had that in investment.
Are there any kind of key indicators that you use to prove the sort of the consistency and stability of your funnel?
Yeah, so I mean, if you looked over from the point that I joined, really, and maybe even prior to that as well, for in terms of sales stuff, from the point I joined roughly around 2 years ago, you could actually see a consistent decline in the cost per acquisition, and then you could see the plateau of it, where we found the correct amount, and then also we could prove that if we kept the conversion levels at that rate, or sorry, the conversion cost at that rate, and then you couple that with the conversion rate of closing from sales from the point of that at around 12.5 to 15%, which it stayed at for a while, then we can prove that if we put X amount of money in there for this period of time and scale it to this point, then X amount should come out. And because we had the data to prove that, and it goes back to talking about being very data driven, and I think as a company being in its infancy as such, we're very data mature. So having all of that able to go ahead and show that was a super beneficial way of doing it.
Perfect. I'd love to get on to campaigns. We've sort of touched on that as well, and obviously you've worked on quite a few. I'd love to know almost if there's one that's sort of been the most successful or most memorable for you, and kind of why that was.
Yeah, I think it's quite an easy one in sense of it was a paid campaign that we ran, but it was off the back of some of these email campaigns that I was talking about, understanding the messaging, and then also understanding that you don't just plug your product out there. So it was in terms of like a Google Ads campaign, we had a specific landing page that we created we've got an instant quote builder on our website, which allows people to basically get a pen test quote in under 60 seconds in just a few clicks, which is amazing. So we really optimized that page, updated some of the key terms and words from what we realized the problems people were having and the research that they were doing on Google. And that's where we saw this conversion cost come down from like 800 to just under 300 over a couple of month period. And it's only sustainable for a period of time once you get that big drop, and then it does plateau out. But having done that, it's allowed us to then understand that we can be more niche with some of our approaches rather than being so like broad with demand capture. We can be a lot more specific with like the key terms that people are searching, especially with the understanding that cybersecurity is one of the biggest growing industries in the world. And pen testing is kind of is going to be, I would say, a necessity in some way, shape or form for pretty much any business.
I'd love to know, kind of as you look to the future as well as your strategy is evolving, is there any technology or trends that you guys are looking into, and with the business specifically?
Yeah, so I didn't quite mention it as like the best performing one just there in terms of campaign, but I ran kind of a basic account-based marketing campaign when I first joined, targeting insurtech businesses, and that was like a super beneficial campaign for us. And it was a way we actually managed to onboard a number of insurtech clients off the back of that, being very personalized, but not using any kind of account-based platforms or software. My previous two roles prior to OnSecurity were kind of more account-based marketing specific roles. So I'm quite well versed in how it works. In terms of what we're going to do going forward, we're going to be implementing a few more specific industry specific ABM campaigns, or I prefer kind of ABX, like account-based experience campaigns, because it doesn't just stop when we hand it over to sales. It continues all the way through the sales cycle to account management, to referrals, and then hopefully becoming an evangelist of the business, right? But in a long-winded answer, we will be onboarding kind of account-based marketing like platform. We'll be exploring different channels, potentially such as Reddit, which I've heard mixed reviews about sometimes because you can get slaughtered on there by some of the users. So it's like testing the waters, but definitely account-based marketing software. We're exploring video, which is definitely new to us, and we'll kind of use some platforms such as Vimeo to do that. We'll also look at podcasting as well as that. So there's a lot of different things and platforms and software that we're going to be onboarding. But one that I didn't mention that has been super beneficial is when it comes to marketing, it's super difficult to sometimes attribute the work that marketing does to help deliver, revenue for the business, right? Because sales make the close, but ultimately we're all one revenue function. So over a year ago now, we signed up to a company called Dream Data, who are a multi-attribution platform. And that's really allowed me to understand for deals that close, how many different touch points and channels have they gone through to get to that point. And that's where we're super confident of seeing this like content funnel that we can build over time. We're confident that when people come onto our website, they do view information quite often, both with what sales share them and what we have on the website to eventually close. So that platform as well is a super important one that we've renewed with as well.
Amazing. That's it from my side. Really appreciate your time again, Felix. It was really great listening to you and I learnt a lot.
Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure to be here.